right?
You see. Counsel, I think you've been informed that juror number 1 has been having some health issues during trial, and nevertheless continued to come in every day. I am informed this morning by my bailiff that Ms. Kelsey called in and couldn't even get out of bed this morning because of a systemic health problem she has. So, my judgment, we will proceed without her, and she will be excused.
After our first 2 witnesses this morning, we're going to ask the court to read the 1 stipulation you already have, and then also read the 2nd stipulation. The parties have signed on it. So we'll have you read the 24-hour fitness one first, and then we'll ask you to read that one.
Okay.
Testimony this
I
morning.
can't hear you.
The other thing we need to deal with is the Ian Foster testimony this morning.
Is that going to be your first witness?
He's our 2nd witness.
I don't have your list of witnesses for today. Maybe I do, but I don't know.
It's
You didn't get one?
You didn't?
It's Ashley Wines is our first witness, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, hold on just a second. Wines?
Yeah, Wines. Actually, I think her name is now Soter, but that was her name at the time.
Okay.
And then Ian Foster is 2nd.
Okay.
And then we'll do the stipulations, but then we'll have Denise, Leer, and Bill Schneck. And that's the morning's witnesses. And this afternoon, we have Dr. Mazrim, Amanda Black, Sergeant Tony McNabb, and Detective Pavlovich.
And Your Honor, there are evidentiary issues with respect to each of the first 2 witnesses that would probably make sense to take up now.
Yes, I have no idea about Ms. Wines. What's the issue with Ms. Wines?
Ms. Wines, Your Honor, we just want to put on the record an objection to relevance with respect to her testimony. She is an individual who worked with Mr. Pietz at the Chase Bank, I believe starting in 2010 and into 2011. She is going to be called to testify to conversations with Mr. Pietz regarding the circumstances surrounding Nicole's disappearance, perhaps some speculation as to what may have happened to her. I think in her statement she said that Mr. Pietz said she might have gotten killed by a drug dealer or something like that. These statements are made 4 years after Nicole disappeared. They're not in the context of the investigation in terms of the police investigation in 2006, and they're several years afterwards. We're noting an objection based on relevance. At some point, the length of time becomes so great, and any comments about what may or may not have happened to her, I think, are too attenuated from the incident. So we would ask to exclude it on that grounds. There's also the issue of how she knew Mr. Pietz. Before she worked with him at the bank, she met him through a friend of hers who was actually dating Mr. Pietz. and we're asking to exclude that as well. We don't think that that's relevant.
First of all, the statements that he made to Ms. Wines about what happened are significantly different than what he has said before. He stated that Nicole had relapsed a couple months earlier. He was slowly trying to work her back to sobriety and get her off pills. He stated that when he got home that night, Nicole was not home, but he decided not to worry about it. He would figure it out in the morning and figured that she had maybe gone out drug seeking or pill seeking. So it's a significantly different statement, which is why we're offering it. And I can address the other point as well right now, if the court wants.
Is the testimony in Ms. Wines that indeed the defendant said that he surmised that she had been killed by a drug dealer?
That was the second part of what he said to her after he said what had happened. Yeah, he said that, I can look right at her statement, he just figured she was out with somebody, and when they found her body, he assumed she'd owed somebody money and somebody in the drug world had murdered her. Later he says he figured she'd gone to work one day, maybe needed a binge or a fix, and then went looking for drugs, and somebody like a drug dealer killed her. That's the second part of what she says after she talks about him indicating she was relapsing. They were trying to work her back to sobriety.
Anything else in rebuttal on that issue?
Yeah, we think that these comments are totally irrelevant, and his speculation is irrelevant.
Your client's speculation is
Yes.
irrelevant. Well, under 801, it's not hearsay. And I would suggest to you that, yes, events are, at this point, relatively dated. But to suggest that any statements your client makes are now irrelevant because the events happened so long ago, I don't think is the law. If it were, it would mean your client takes a stand we're not going to hear from him because the events happened too long ago, so anything he says is irrelevant. That doesn't make sense. They are statements by your client. Whether he made them or not is not an issue for me, but if he is still speculating and perhaps even wildly speculating to other people concerning the events, it's relevant. Yes, the events happened 7 years ago. He happens to be on trial today, and what your client says is still of note.
Your Honor, I just want to put on the record that under 403, we think that any probative value is substantially outweighed by the unfair prejudice, given the timing issues and so forth.
Well, let me suggest, counsel, if you put your client on the stand in this trial and said, Mr. Pietz, you've told the jury you didn't do it. Do you know who did do it? Objection? Too long ago, too speculative? Yeah, I have a very good idea who did it. No. Objection. Happened too long ago. No. I mean, you might object because it's a third party and there's not enough good information, but to suggest because it happened so long ago that your client's opinions on the day in question become irrelevant, I don't think so. That would almost suggest that if he changed his mind and decided to plead guilty today, I couldn't accept it because the event happened too long ago. That's not the rule. It's still, I suspect that when you lose a spouse, regardless of whether it's 7 years ago or 20 years ago, for a surviving spouse, it always remains pretty fresh. That would be my judgment as somebody who's been married a long time. It doesn't ever go away. All right.
Very well, Your Honor. The second evidentiary issue is with respect to Ian Foster.
Right.
And Ian Foster, as far as I can tell, the substance of his testimony is going to be that Mr. Pietz told him
Excuse
he...
me just a second. Could you, Terry, could you...
The girlfriend issue. Oh, okay. And, Your Honor, I guess the other issue that we need to resolve with respect to Ms. Wines is whether
Sure.
or not the...
Oh, the girlfriend issue?
Right.
Are you planning to get that in?
Well, if I'm not allowed to, I was just going to say I'm Madam Rose, my girlfriend.
I haven't made a ruling. If I'm not allowed to suggest that you want to.
Well, right now, I'm just asking her, how did you meet the defendant, and she was going to say a girlfriend of mine was dating him. If the court doesn't want that, I can say.
I met him through a friend of mine.
I can advise her of that. Then then I would also move in limine. Apparently, they all attended this church together, and I would move to preclude that. That's obviously not relevant. And I think if defense is going to try to make it look like he never dated, I don't want it to look like he's a church-going non-dater. So I would move that be kept out as well.
Well, are you going to,
Well, they did, I think they all met through a church. They were on a kickball.
then you want to get that in, right?
They were on a kickball team together. I mean, it's,
I mean, counsel, they want to get in, he met because he was dating some woman. You say, well, yeah, I want to keep out the fact of the dating, but I want to get together, they met in a prayer session. I mean, if it's irrelevant on one side, it's irrelevant on the other side. So, they met through a mutual friend.
I will advise the witness. And I assume that means the church is out as well.
They met through a mutual friend.
Thank you, Your Honor.
If there's some relevance to the fact that they were in church together, I'll hear it. But if it's just to get in the fact that he went to church, no, because that's simply putting his character into issue as well. Only it's a different character than the other character. Yes, sir.
with respect to Ian Foster's expected testimony is that in 2012, or I guess probably 2011, during the time that they were working together at the Chase Bank, Mr. Pietz told Mr. Foster that he calls the detective every year on the anniversary of Nicole's death to see if there's any leads and check on the status and so forth. This expected testimony is only relevant because I expect that the state, after eliciting this testimony, is then going to call one of the detectives later in their case in chief and testify that they never heard from Mr. Pietz after 2006, and he never did contact them, and he didn't ask any questions, and he didn't provide any further information. This would be a clear comment or bringing in substantive evidence regarding Mr. Pietz's assertion of his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. And the Washington law is clear that the state cannot bring in evidence of a defendant's assertion of his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. In 2006, this is February 8th, 2006, the detectives went out to Mr. Pietz's condo to administer a second polygraph test. And this was Detectives Decker and Detectives Anderson. When they went out there to administer the second polygraph test, Mr. Pietz and his father informed the detectives that they had retained an attorney, Mr. Allen, and Mr. Pietz would not be taking a second polygraph, and he was not going to provide any further information. Mr. Pietz, Jr., in fact, confirmed this to the detectives. And thereafter, Mr. Pietz, Jr. never had any contact with the investigating detectives until he was arrested in 2012. He had an attorney the entire time. The state clearly cannot bring in the fact that Mr. Pietz retained an attorney and told the detectives about this, and they can't bring in the fact that he asserted his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
Let me ask you a question, Counsel. My recollection is that they were, it may be confusing what happened in pretrial to what happened in trial, but I've already heard from the detectives that they interviewed your client. I think the jury's already heard that.
In 2006 or 2012?
In 2006.
Correct. That was the interview that we heard.
We heard that.
That was prior to his
Right.
invocation.
Right. So are you suggesting that if they asked, at the end of that, if they simply asked the detective, is that the last time you talked to the defendant, and said yes, that would be inadmissible?
Yes, because he asserted his Fifth Amendment right to remain
That's-
silent.
I don't think that's inadmissible. Is that the last time you talked to him? Yes. I didn't talk to him after that. Why I didn't talk to him, because he asserted his Fifth Amendment right, you can't get into. But I don't see any issue that if you say, how many times did you interview the defendant? Once. Once. it. And then he goes and tells everybody, I talked to him 12 times. That's not invoking anything about Fifth Amendment.
But he did invoke his Fifth Amendment
That
right.
doesn't raise anything about the Fifth Amendment. The fact that the officer says, how many times did you speak to the defendant? Once. That's it. That doesn't raise Miranda. The jury has already heard what he said in that interview. To say at the end of the question, did you talk to him again? No. But that doesn't raise the issue of Miranda or the right to remain silent. It just says they only had one interview.
But the explanation is that he asserted his right to remain silent.
And they can't bring that in.
But it puts Mr. Pietz in the impossible situation of deciding whether he's got to take the stand and explain that he took the Fifth Amendment right, whether he
It
has
doesn't put him in that position at all. It just says the detectives never went back and interviewed him again. That's fine. We had one interview with him, that was it. That doesn't raise anything about the Fifth Amendment.
I think it does, because we all know that, in fact, he did assert it.
You know it. The jury doesn't know it.
But their assumption is going to be that he didn't talk because he's guilty.
I don't think that's necessarily the assumption at all.
Your Honor, if I may have
The
one.
assumption I would draw is the defendants, the detectives, had their interview of him. They asked the questions they wanted to ask, and that was enough for them. They didn't go back. He didn't call them to get an update, because he could call him and say, what's going on? That doesn't invoke his right to silence either. He's not asking any questions. He could call and say, would you send me a yearly update? That doesn't invoke the right to silence, if he did it. But the issue, invoking the right to silence, is saying, I don't want to talk to you. And then the state says that's because he's guilty. But if the detectives say, I interviewed him one time and only one time, that doesn't say anything about the right to silence.
May I talk to Mr.
Sure.
Objections?
I mean, the state, you're fully aware, the state cannot bring up the fact that he hired a lawyer and said, I'm not talking to you now. Can't do that.
Of course, however, we would be bringing out through detectives in response to what Mr. Foster testifies to, that he did not contact them on the anniversary.
No, they can just say, did you have any further conversations with him? No.
But, Your Honor, the point is that he lied
I know
to
the point
Mr.
is
Foster.
I know that's your point.
Correct.
I'm not taking any position on whether he lied.
Oh, I understand that.
I can't, but I know your assertion is that he lied to Mr. Foster.
Right.
And,
But the only way to prove that lie is to prove that it didn't happen the way that he said.
The officer can testify it didn't happen. How many times did you talk to him? Once. Did you ever talk to him again after that first date? No. If he says, I called him 12 times or 6 times or however many times and had conversations with him, he'd say, we never had any conversation. Doesn't matter whether I initiated or he initiated. We never spoke again. There's your issue. It's not that he chose not to call me, I chose not to call him, the conversations never happened. That does not implicate the right to silence. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I just want to add a couple of things. First of all, our position is that this is irrelevant because the only purpose for which it could be offered is to show that because he didn't have contact with the detectives, therefore he's guilty.
I don't agree.
Secondly, I want to make it clear that Mr. Allen, who was his retained attorney through all these years, did have contact with Mr. Ernsdorf. And Mr. Ernsdorf was the assigned prosecutor for approximately 3 or 4 years.
Let me tell you my spin on why he's relevant. Is that he's presenting himself to his friend as a devastated, loving husband who on the anniversary of his wife's death continues to call to get an update on the investigation on the hopes that the investigation is still open and that they'll ultimately find the perpetrator. That's the inference if you continue to tell this to a friend. Or that is a permissible inference of the light you're trying to portray yourself. if in fact you're not telling the truth to your friend when you say it, then the counter inference is that you are a husband, an ex-husband, who for some reason is somehow guilt-ridden, and you just assume the whole investigation go away. You want it to end, never to hear from it again, as opposed to the husband who wants to stir the pot every year and keep it open. That's what I consider to be the logical inference, or a logical inference. And if you are the guilt-ridden husband who just wants to see the investigation end, and so he can go on and live his life, then there is a permissible inference that you have consciousness of guilt. It has nothing to do with his Fifth Amendment assertion, his desire not to talk to police, nothing. It's simply how he's representing himself to his friend. And he's making, arguably, a misrepresentation to the friend. I think it has nothing to do with the Fifth Amendment.
Very well, Your Honor. I just want to put on the record that the cases that I provided to the court, State v. Burke, 163, Washington 2nd, 204, and State v. Gautier, 174, Washington App, 257, we believe are the relevant cases that support our position.
I looked at those cases, and I agree with what those cases held. I just think this is a different case.
And so to clarify the court's ruling, the detective is permitted to say that after the interview in 2006, there never was any further conversation?
No further contact. No direct contact with him. No conversation at all. He didn't have to say I talked to his lawyer. He didn't have to say he called me or I called him. Just says that was the last time I ever talked to him, which would have been admissible either way, regardless of whether he asserts his privilege. Because the jury might be saying, well, what else did he get from him? I didn't get anything. I had enough. Nobody can ask him why he didn't talk to him. He just didn't. Are we ready for the jury?
Yes, I just put on the record that one of the cases we provided the court was Salinas v. Texas. Salinas v. Texas.
You know what? You don't even, for purposes of appeal, you don't even have to tell them appeal what cases I read.
I know, Your Honor, but sometimes it's helpful to our appellate attorney.
Is it? Oh. I mean, you argued the issue, and when either side goes to the appellate court, you get to present any case law you want, regardless of whether you told me about the case law, whether I read it, whether I misunderstood it. It's an issue of law, which they hear to know. They'll consider the facts as facts, but as to what the law is, they can consider anything they want to. And they will. All right.
About the ruling before,
All right.
while you're able to sit in the truck.
I am ready for the jury. Terry, I am ready for the jury. Counsel, if you need any drops, I have refreshing my supply today. If anybody is coming down with my ailments. They call them Ricola.
Oh, I know those. That's a good.
Yerbe? I don't know. And I've got a mix, actually. I also said some Rite Aid menthol eucalyptus, but it's mixed. But counsel, if you need anything, let me know. It's a mixed bag. It's a classic mixed bag. And they are available. I think Cherry's had candy up here too. I don't know what she's doing. Yeah? Really? Don't lose you? I just got you. Huh? You probably gotta love them and leave them. Huh? Huh? Get them, get their anticipation up and then just drop them. Drop them. Please be seated. Please come forward and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm your testimony in this matter will be the... You're going to need to speak a little louder than that in this courtroom. Thank you. Have a seat. And give us your name, please, and spell maybe both names.
Okay, Ashley Soter, Ashley Sauter.
And Ms. Potter, what was your maiden name?
Wines.
Wines, is that
Yep.
right? Where do you currently live?
In Kirkland.
What do you do for a living?
I work at Microsoft.
At one time, did you know David Pietz?
Yes, I did know him.
How did you meet Mr. Pietz?
Through some acquaintances.
Did you end up at some point working with him after meeting him?
Yes, I did.
Where did you end up working with him at?
At Chase Bank in downtown Kirkland.
What year or time period would that have been, if you recall?
It would have been about fall of 2010.
And what did you do at the bank and what did he do at the bank?
I was one of the tellers there, and he was the branch manager.
During the time that you knew him, did you learn or have occasion to talk to him about what had happened to his wife, Nicole?
Yes, quite a few times.
And do you remember what he said about that to you?
In the beginning, a lot of it was just kind of scratching the surface. He had mentioned briefly that his ex-wife had been killed, and that was kind of it. And then, as time passed, more and more stuff was kind of, I guess, revealed or discussed.
What would he say?
He spoke about how his ex-wife used to be an addict, and that there was a time close to her death where he thought that she was in the middle of kind of relapsing, and he was helping her to get back to sobriety.
Your Honor, I'll just note my prior objection to this testimony.
No.
Did he ever tell you how long before she died that he had believed she was relapsing and he was helping her get sober again?
He made it sound about a few months beforehand.
And did he indicate, when he talked about her being an addict and relapsing, what she was using in those months before?
He had said that he was trying to wean her down with the pills, kind of like he was monitoring her intake of some sort.
And he was trying to get her off of them, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Now, did you have occasion to talk to him about what had happened when she actually disappeared and was killed?
Yes, he had mentioned that she was supposed to be going to an AA meeting and that she didn't return home, so he believed that it was basically a drug deal gone bad, that she had probably owed money to one of the dealers she was supposed to be getting drugs from, and that he or she, I suppose, had murdered her.
And did he talk about when he had last seen her or him coming home one night, do you recall?
I probably remember more from what the media has told me at this point, but I know that she didn't.
Talk about that, okay?
Nope, not going to.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I want to stick real carefully to your memory of what he said to you.
Okay.
Did you give a statement to the police about this matter?
Yes.
Do you think that would help refresh your memory as to what you recall specifically about what he talked about?
Sure.
I'm going to mark that and have you look at that if you would.
Okay.
Just one moment, Ms. Wines.
Okay.
I'm going to hand you with me, Marcus, excuse me, Exhibit 113, and ask if you recognize this as a statement you gave to police on this matter. Is that a statement that you gave to police, Ms. Wines?
Yes,
I mean, Ms.
it is.
Soter, I'm sorry. I'm
It's
using
okay. It's new.
And I'm going to have you turn, if you would, to page 4 of that statement. I'm going to have you read to yourself, if you would, not out loud,
Okay.
the bottom paragraph on page 4 into the top of page 5, if you would, and then I'm going to ask you a couple questions, okay?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And what I want to ask is first, does that refresh your memory as to whether he said anything about coming home one night?
Yes.
What did he say about that?
He said that he went home and she wasn't there.
And did he indicate whether that was late, early, that he came home?
Late. He said he was exhausted from the day, so
He came home late and she wasn't there?
yes.
And then what did he say to you at that point about what he was going to do or did do when he came home and she wasn't there?
He said he went to bed and woke up the next morning and she was not there.
And did he say anything about whether he would figure it out later?
No.
Will you look at the bottom of page 4 again?
Yep. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, it says that he'll just figure it out in the morning.
And is that when he talked about the fact that he thought she had gone relapsing and maybe getting drugs?
Yes.
Do you know approximately how many times you would have talked to him about his wife Nicole during the time that you knew him or worked with him?
I would say roughly 4 or 5 times.
Thank you, Ms. Soter. I don't have any other questions for you.
Thanks.
Ms. Soter, you don't remember David's exact words when he
Told you the circumstances surrounding Nicole's disappearance. Do you?
Verbatim?
Yeah.
No.
In fact, haven't you previously said that you don't remember word for word what he said?
It was a few years ago, so yes.
Okay. You testified on direct examination that David told you something about Nicole relapsing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not actually the word he used, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Isn't that a word, though, that you just picked up from TV? Isn't that what you previously said?
There's quite a few things you probably pick up from TV, but when somebody is an addict and they go back to being an addict, it's considered relapsing.
Would you take a look at page 5 of your statement, please?
Sure.
Do you see
Yep.
after the first paragraph there, the detective asked you, you used the word relapse. Is that your word or his word or something else or Callan's word? And your response was, that's probably just a word I pick up from watching TV. I don't know. What's it called when you're an addict and you go start over again?
Which is pretty much what I just said to you as well, so yes.
Okay. But you told the detectives that this word was something, this word that you used to describe your conversation with David was something you picked up from TV. Is that right?
I guess so, yeah.
Well,
Seems to be that way.
that's what you told the
Yep,
police,
seems
wasn't
that
it?
way.
Okay. When you were discussing, when you were testifying regarding David's statements about, or what you claim David said about coming home late and she wasn't home, Weren't you testifying, though, just kind of about the general idea or sense of the statements that David was making to you, rather than the specific words?
Can you clarify that question
Well,
for me?
look at the bottom of page 4 of your statement. Didn't you tell the detectives, I guess he was just exhausted, came home late, she wasn't home. He's like, okay, I'll figure it out in the morning. I think is kind of the idea I got from it.
Okay.
Is that what you told the detectives in 2012?
Yes.
You also testified on direct examination about your claim that David said something about a drug dealer killing her in a context of a drug deal or something like that.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah.
But didn't you also tell the detectives in 2012 that you made some assumptions yourself about what Nicole had been doing based on what David had told you?
I knew nothing about Nicole until I met Dave.
Well,
He filled in the blanks for me.
if you look at page 5 of your statement, about 3/4 of the way down, or 4/5 of the way down, the detective's asking you about pills.
Mm-hmm.
And you told the detective, I didn't ask, like, oh, so who is she getting them from? I didn't ask for specific things like that. But in my mind, I guess I just assumed that she started talking to the wrong people again. Is that what you told the detectives in 2012?
Well, yeah, that was part of the conversation.
At the time of your interview in 2012, you knew David had been arrested for murder.
Yes.
These conversations that you had with David were in 2010, 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And after talking with David about his wife's disappearance and death, didn't you do some internet research on it, some Google research?
There's actually quite a few people at the bank who did do that.
And
Yes.
you did that as well.
Yes, I was with him.
And we heard the name Callan used. Was that one of the mutual friends that you
Yep,
and
she
David
is
had
a
in
mutual
common?
friend.
I don't have any other questions. Oh, Your Honor. Give me 1 second. Hard to distinguish between some of the things that you learned from the internet and some of the things that you say David told you back in 2010, 2011?
No, I remember pretty clearly when someone's speaking about murdering their wife.
Well,
No.
you're not saying that David Pietz told you he murdered his wife, are you?
No, but he's definitely told me a bunch of excuses as to who else could have done it. I remember those conversations specifically.
But didn't you bring in some words that you learned from TV, such as relapsing?
Yes, we've already gone over this, but it's very hard to not remember when somebody is making up excuses or something like this.
You're saying that you remember these conversations exactly, word for word?
We were at the bank. He was standing right here next to me.
Would you take a look at page 6 of your
Sure.
interview? At the top of page 6, you're discussing what you say David Pietz told you with respect to what happened to his wife, and you said, that's what he told me basically. I mean, not word for word, but that's the general idea of what he had said to me. Is that what you said in 2012?
said, yep.
Ms. Soter, when you had these conversations in 2010 or 2011, you had no idea that David Pietz would ultimately be arrested for murder.
No, I didn't have any idea.
I don't have any other questions, John.
Any redirect?
Ms. Soter, didn't the defendant actually ask you to Google it at one point?
Yes.
And one of the excuses that you referred to them that he was saying was that she had relapsed and he was trying to help her get back to being clean and sober?
Yes.
Leading.
Well, it's asked and answered,
Asked and answered.
so it's repetitive. Why don't you do something new, counsel?
Well, I'd like to know, was the main thing he was telling you about her being
Counsel.
relapsed?
Counsel,
Yes.
that was asked and answered on direct examination.
I know, but Your Honor,
Objection is sustained.
in cross-examination, counsel went over,
Objection is sustained.
what did he tell you about Nicole?
He said if I Googled it, I would be able to find out that she was an alcoholic.
Thank you, Ms. Soter.
I don't have any other questions, Your Honor.
You may sit down.
Okay, thank you. What do I?
Right here, please.
Yeah.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm your testimony in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Be seated.
Could you tell us your name and spell your first and last name for the record, please?
My name is Ian Foster, IANFOSTER.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a personal banker,
For what bank?
Bank of America,
How long have you lived in this area?
approximately 3 years.
Do you know the defendant, David Pietz?
I do.
And how do you know him?
I was previously employed with Chase, and I was a personal banker with Chase,
And what
and
was...
Dave was my manager.
Okay. And do you remember about when that was?
Approximately May 2nd, 2011, until I believe it was end of April 2012.
Would you consider yourself to have been friends with him at the bank? Or was it more employee-employer?
I would say more employee-employer.
Okay. Regardless of that, did you ever hear him talk about his wife?
Occasionally, yes.
Okay. And what did he say had happened to her?
That she passed away.
Okay. At some point, did you learn more about how she died?
Yeah, it was after the fact. I guess the particular circumstances when I first learned that she passed away is in a couple months after I was hired. In July, it was around my birthday. One of my friends had passed away the year before, and I was kind of having a hard time. And Dave kind of pulled me aside and talked to me, and I kind of explained, why I seemed kind of depressed at the time, and he informed me that his wife had passed away.
Okay. And did he ever tell you that she'd been murdered?
No.
Did you ever overhear him say something to someone about the murder case?
Yes.
And who was he talking to?
Carla, the assistant ranch manager.
Okay. And what did you hear him say?
I heard him talk to her about how he calls the lead detective every year on the anniversary. to
Of
see if
what?
there-
On the anniversary of?
Of her death, to see if there's been any breakthroughs or any leads, or if there's anything that he can do to provide any information.
And where was it that you heard this?
At the bank at Chase.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Your Honor, I don't have any questions on cross-examination.
You may step down there, please.
Thank you.
Oh.
The first one on 24-hour fitness, on the first one on the 24-hour fitness.
Members of the jury, the parties have agreed that certain facts are true, and you should accept as true the following facts. The defendant transferred to the downtown Seattle 24-hour fitness on January 1st, 2006. Then it transferred from the downtown Seattle location to the Shoreline location on April 16th, 2006. That's the first stipulation. Second stipulation reads as follows. In the Washington Mutual Joint Checking Account records for David and Nicole Pietz, there was a debit charge dated January 27, 2006 from Taco Time, 1010 164th Street, Linwood, Washington, in the amount of $5.47.
Denise, Leer.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm your testimony in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Be seated.
Good morning. Morning. State your first and last name and spell them both if you would.
Denise Leer, DeniseLear.
Thank you. What do you do for a living, Ms. Leer?
I am a general manager for Taco Time.
How long have you held that position?
28 years.
What does that involve, being a general manager?
Running day-to-day operations with the other store managers, looking over multiple locations.
And have you held that job all 28 years, or have you gone through different positions? at
I've gone
Taco
through
Time?
different positions.
I want to take you back to 2006 and ask if you recall being contacted by the King County Sheriff's Office in regards to locating a specific receipt for them
I do.
involving Nicole Pietz' investigation.
Yes.
That was properly directed to you, or do you know why it came to your attention?
I was actually the store manager at that point in time.
And was it a store manager of a particular store they were interested in?
Yes,
Which one was that?
that was the Martha Lake location.
And I'm sorry, where's that located at?
Mill Creek, Washington?
Now, were you given information by the police in order to try to track down this receipt?
Yes, they were actually looking for a specific amount, and we have the last few digits on the card number.
And is it in fact possible to track down receipts that way if you know the card number that was used?
Absolutely.
How did you go about doing that?
We keep records for a multiple of 7 years, so we just had to go back through the date that they gave us to look through.
Do you remember the amount that you were given?
I do not remember the amount.
Does $5.47 sound correct?
Yes,
Were you in fact able to find a receipt in the system?
yes, we were.
And what did you do once you located that?
We had to figure out what totaled up to that amount, what meal, whether it was a single item, and with the debit surcharge.
And let me ask you, before you get to that, did you provide the actual receipt that you pulled up to the sheriff's office?
We actually gave them a copy.
Okay. I want to show you that right now, for what I believe is that.
State's Exhibit 114 has been.
Do you recall if you faxed it to them or how you provided it to them?
I believe we faxed it to them.
And I'm going to show you this. Does this appear to be a copy of a fax that contains that receipt that was sent to the detectives?
Yes, it does.
And is that for what we are talking about now, the amount and with the card number that we've been referring to?
That is correct.
Okay. So at this time, I would offer Exhibit 114.
No objection.
Submitted.
Ms. Leer, I want to now ask you what you were starting to get into, which is, were you asked by detectives to try to figure out whether there's some sort of combo or combo meal that might add up to the $5.47 that are on that receipt?
Yes.
Were you able to come up with a combination meal that might meet that?
Yes.
What is that, I guess? What combo meal?
That would be a number 4 meal.
And obviously, that would have been the number 4 meal in 2006 that you were
Yes.
trying to find out?
Yes.
What was in the combo meal number 4?
That contained 2 crisp tacos, a small order of Mexi fries, and a medium drink.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Can you just repeat that again?
2 crisp tacos, a Mexi fry, and a medium drink.
And so for one price, you would get all of those things?
Yes.
What, back in 2006, would normally be included in the tacos?
That would be ground beef, cheese, lettuce, and tomato.
And you mentioned something about surcharge. What did you mean by that?
That is the debit surcharge that we had back then, and it was a 69-cent fee to run to run a debit card.
So when you figured out that you thought the combo 4 would match, did you take into account the fact that it would have been a 69-cent surcharge?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Let me ask you a couple more questions about that, Ms. Lear. Back in 2006, did Taco Time have the option to get a crisp taco combo meal with just beans?
Not unless specifically asked.
So if you wanted to order beans in your crisp tacos, would you have to substitute the beef for the beans?
Yes, you would.
And the receipt that you have in front of you, would that specify whether any substitutions like that had been done?
No, it will not.
If you were ordering a combo meal like we're describing, and there were other items you didn't want, like perhaps tomatoes, could you ask to have those kept out?
Absolutely.
I don't think I asked you this. What's the address of the store location that receipt was used at?
It is 1010 164th Street Southwest.
And can you read on that receipt what time that receipt is from? It's very difficult to read.
6:22 p.m.
Okay. And what's the date on that receipt?
January 27th.
Okay. And are you familiar, the time that might be printed on a receipt, is that the time that you pay essentially? Would that be the time?
Yes.
wanted to ask this. You said the date was January 27th. Is it 2006?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Leer. I don't have any other questions for you.
Cross.
Ms. Leer, the only combination meal that Taco Time sold in 2006 that would total exactly $5.47 is this number 4 combo meal. Is that true?
That is correct.
And in January of 2006, the price of that meal was $4.78, which included tax.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a 69-cent surcharge for using a debit card.
Correct.
And this transaction used a debit card.
Yes.
And the total then was exactly $5.47.
Yes.
There were no other food combinations possible at Taco Time that one could to come up to a total amount of $5.47.
Absolutely not. We ran multiple combinations of items and food with the surcharge, and that was the one that we came up with.
And you did this running of the various combinations back in 2006
Yes.
when you were contacted by the detectives.
Yes.
You said on direct examination that the number 4 meal includes 2 crisp tacos. Is that
Yes.
true?
True.
Mexi fries and also a drink?
Correct.
And the ingredients in the crisp taco include ground beef,
Correct.
Lettuce,
Correct.
tomatoes,
Yes.
cheddar cheese,
Correct.
and a crispy corn taco shell.
Yes.
The Mexi fries are made out of a fried potato, basically.
Correct.
Kind of like a French fry, but the Taco Time Mexican version.
Right.
And it's a potato base.
It is.
All of these items, well, let me back up, strike that. The tacos and the burritos and the main entree items that are sold by Taco Time, those can all be purchased separately.
Absolutely.
So if all you want is a burrito, you can just buy a burrito
Yes.
if you don't want the Mexi fries.
Right.
If all you want is a taco, you can just buy the taco. You don't have to buy the combo meal.
Absolutely.
The combo meal includes the Mexi fries and the drink.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now, there are a number of other items on the Taco Time menu that just have beans in them.
Yes, there is.
There's a soft burrito that just
Correct.
has beans.
Correct.
There's a crisp burrito that just has beans.
Correct.
And those items actually don't have tomatoes or lettuce in them, do they?
Correct.
But those items, either alone or in combination with any other items, could not be purchased for a total amount of $5.47.
No.
And beans has never been an official substitute for beef in the crisp taco.
Right.
On the
Unless specified.
But on the menu, when you look at the menu, the only thing that comes in the crisp tacos is beans. Or, sorry, is beef.
Beef, yes.
It doesn't say, there's some options where you can pick chicken or beef. Is that true?
Correct.
Crisp tacos is not one of those. Crisp tacos is not one of the ones on the menu that has an option to substitute the filling.
Exactly.
And that remains true today, too, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't.
Well, isn't the crisp taco today on Taco Time's menu still just described as containing seasoned lean ground beef?
It is.
Okay, it doesn't say anything about an option to substitute beans, even today.
No, that's in-store only. That's where you would see it.
Okay. But the crisp taco, again, is the one with the tomatoes and the lettuce.
Yes.
And there are other items that don't contain lettuce and tomatoes and contain beans.
Exactly.
But based on the amount that this receipt has on it,
Mm-hmm.
the only option that could have been bought was the number 4 crisp taco meal.
Yes.
And that included Mexi fries.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions, Your Honor.
Anything else from the state?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Leer, counsel asked you about the burrito having just beans as an option. Is the burrito a different item than a crisp taco?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you describe the burrito as compared to the taco?
The burrito is actually on a soft flour shell, and it just contains beans, cheese, and a burrito sauce.
Are the combo meals designed to save people money if they want to get more than just the entree?
Yes, they are.
So I just want to clarify, back in 2006,
Mhm.
was there a combo for 2 crisp tacos with beans?
Absolutely not.
So the only way to get 2 crisp tacos with beans in a combo would have been to get the beef ones, but substitute beans?
Correct.
I don't have anything further, thank you.
You may step down. Actually, you may step down.
Okay, thank you.
And you have a...
I'll take that from you. Thank you very much.
All right, next witness. Come forward, sir. Worker, and your testimony in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Be seated.
Thank you.
Could you tell us your name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Yes, my name is William Schneck. The last name is spelled Schneck.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm a forensic scientist.
Where do you work?
I work for the Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory in Cheney, Washington.
And do you have a consultation firm as well?
Yes, I do,
And how long have you had that?
since 1995.
And what does that firm do?
That firm analyzes very similar ingredients and products as I do for the State Patrol. I analyze building materials, soil, gastric contents, food products, contaminants, I should say, paint, glass, hairs, fibers, practically any small microscopic particle that's non-living usually.
Is that unusual to have something sent to the Cheney lab for that type of work from Seattle?
Oh, it wouldn't be unusual at all.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and education and training for what you do?
Certainly, education-wise, I started out with a 2-year degree in respiratory therapy from Milwaukee Area Technical College in 1976. In 1982, I believe it is, I received a Bachelor of Science degree in Allied Health Sciences from Georgia State University in Atlanta. And approximately 2 years later, received a Bachelor of Science degree in Geology from that same university in Atlanta. My last degree is a Master's of Science degree in Geology from Eastern Washington University in Cheney.
How about your training with regard to forensic issues?
Training, well, my previous employment before the Washington State Patrol was at a private firm known as McCrone Associates, McCrone Environmental Services in Atlanta, and they were known as one of the premier labs for particle analysis using microscopes. In that regard, I used microscopes to identify building materials.
Tell us a little bit about your background with regard to things other than building materials. For example, you talked about gastric contents and soils.
Yes, in terms of soils and gastric contents, first soils, I'm actually on a member international working group on forensic geology, and I'm also chairman of a scientific working group on forensic geology here in the United States, where we travel around the world promoting forensic geology as a science and discipline of forensics. And gastric contents analysis, I also perform workshops and training seminars around the country in identifying food and gastric contents. And I testified in court around the country also in that regard.
And what types of groups have you done work for as part of your forensic consulting firm?
I've worked for, well, quite a few different private attorneys in civil litigation cases around the country. I've worked for defense attorneys in criminal cases. I've worked for prosecuting attorneys in criminal cases, for instance, in Idaho, in Utah, California, Tennessee, FBI, which I have not testified yet, but I have received work from them. And, well, quite a few other states, along with Idaho and Montana.
Okay. When we talk about forensics, what does that mean exactly?
Forensics, we're looking at evidence, physical evidence, in the regard that I'm involved in this, and looking at any facts and any types of particles which could be helpful to the law establishment, to legal implications.
And what types of things have you performed forensic microanalysis on?
Well, I performed analysis on quite a few different things. Fibers, fabric materials, hairs, paint, glass, soil, impression evidence such as shoe prints and tire tracks, geological material, oftentimes soil that transfers from one item to another, botanical material, leaves and twigs, and paper fibers. For instance, the paper from a piece of paper from a notebook, that actually comes from trees mainly, and cotton. But that can be digested, and the species can be determined from the analysis using microscopes.
And how long have you been at the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab?
For 23 years, since about August of 1990.
Have you trained other people in how to do this type of analysis?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and where do you do that? What types of groups do you talk to?
Well, a lot of the training is in-house, training other forensic scientists around the state. But in my private business, I teach at the California Criminalistics Institute in Sacramento, Department of Justice Training Center, where I teach one-week workshops in basic microscopy, polarizing microscopy, and in soil and building materials. I've also been adjunct faculty at UC Davis, California, and Eastern Washington University in Cheney, where I taught. And I've also taught workshops in Bogota, Colombia, on geology, forensic geology, and in Rome, Italy. I workshop there in forensic geology, and workshops, oh well, there have been quite a few. Fort Worth, Texas on gastric contents, Savannah, Georgia, Oklahoma City, and that's there's quite a few more, but those are the ones I can think of right at the moment.
Okay. Did you do work at the Cheney lab in connection with the murder case involving Nicole Pietz?
Yes, I did.
Let's look first at soil analysis in this case.
Yes.
Were you asked to examine dirt that had been taken from underneath Nicole Pietz's body where she was discovered?
Yes, I was.
And what were you asked to compare it to?
I was asked to compare it, first of all, to some soil that was recovered from a floor mat in a vehicle, and also compare it to some soil that was found, well, underneath the body of Nicole Pietz.
And did you receive soil that had been collected from under her body?
Yes, I did.
And did you receive other material from the Jetta, from the car?
Yes, I did.
Okay, in the form of the mat itself?
Yes. May I refer to my notes, Sharon?
You may.
Thank you. Well, there was a soil sample taken from a mobile home park, which was also examined, and some botanical material from the scene near the victim, and soil samples from the victim's car.
Okay. And what was the result of your comparison?
The result of the comparison is the soil did not, they were not consistent. The soil from underneath her body and the soil that was taken from the car did not appear to be from the exact same location.
Okay. Now, let's talk about dirt. Can you describe whether there is some diversity in different types of soils? And
Yes.
And what's it based on?
Yes, there's quite a bit of diversity actually, and that's what the basis of why we can actually examine soil, because of its diversity. For instance, if all soil looked alike, there would be no use and no probative value in analyzing it. So we do look at the diversity of soil, and it can differ from inches to feet to miles away. You could have one location on the ground And you could dig a foot away, and that soil could be different in color or composition, depending on the environment. Urban environments versus rural environments, there's all sorts of reasons why that could be different, from contamination issues to industrial products being in the soil. So, yes.
And in a wooded area that has a lot of maybe transient traffic, different things dumped in it, that sort of thing, what can affect the makeup of a soil that would be collected maybe a foot from Nicole's body versus what's underneath her body?
Well, as previously stated, in that type of environment, there could be distinctive changes in the soil due to the composition of plants that grow over it, or urban development, homes that are built nearby, street, particles from the debris of a street.
Okay. So are you saying that the soil found in the car did not come from underneath her body?
The soil that was found under her body is not the exact same composition as the soil in the car.
Okay. Are you saying that it did not come from the area where her body was found, where other samples might not have been taken?
Yes, if other samples were to have been taken in that vicinity, you may very well have found one that would have similarities, but none were taken, so do not know.
Now, we've heard testimony about swabs that were taken off her body in soil that were tested for DNA. Can testing for DNA destroy a swab sample of soil for your purposes?
No, it would not.
If the sample on the swab is fully consumed, obviously, then you can't compare it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Even if you had been able to test the sort of mud-like substance swab from the top of her body, would the same rule apply with regard to the diversity of the soil varying greatly from one area to another,
Yes, it would.
even if that area is close by?
Yes.
Were you also asked to examine what was found in Nicole Pietz's stomach at the time of her death?
Yes, I was. Well, the stomach contents were received in a sealed container, actually from the police department.
Okay. And is it your understanding they had been taken out during her autopsy?
Yes, they were. Yeah, that is my understanding.
How had they been preserved?
They were preserved, I believe, in a frozen state prior to my examination.
Now, when someone dies, does the digestion of what's in their stomach stop?
No, it doesn't, really. There's a lot of digestive enzymes and acids which are retained in the stomach. So it continues for some time. The exact time frame would be dependent on many factors.
When decomposition begins, can that affect the look and makeup of food that remains in the stomach?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, as food's in the stomach, it's being churned while alive through the digestive processes. First in the mouth, it's digested. Digestion begins with saliva and the chewing or mastication of food and producing those small pieces, of course, as we're all aware. Goes through the esophagus down into the stomach, passes one of the first sphincters or valves. And in the stomach, there's various folds within the stomach that churn the material out quite a bit. And it's digested with enzymes, pepsin, pepsinogen, and a very strong, hydrochloric acid, form of acid. And while it's there for a long period of time, it'll undergo decay and also digestion, so the particles will start to disintegrate and basically dissolve into smaller, more minute pieces continually.
Generally, how long does it take for food to move through the stomach and into the intestine so that it's emptied out of the stomach?
Of course, that's dependent on the types of food and the metabolic activity of the individual, but a rule of thumb is 4 to 6 hours. But depending on the health of the individual, the activity of the individual, disease states the individual may have, it could be longer or shorter. Some foods may take just longer to dissolve, such as meats, for instance, that might just take a little longer to digest through the system and move along.
Okay. And some others may digest faster?
Yes.
Do you recall the amount of gastric contents that you received?
It was approximately 1/4 of a cup.
Did you start the analysis of the stomach contents before getting the particulars of what the police knew about her purchase of a meal on February 27th of 2006?
Would Looking through my notes, I believe I did have an idea of I knew there was a receipt
Okay.
with the meal purchase before I began.
But you didn't know what the contents of the meal were?
I believe I may have.
Okay. Did you do preliminary analysis with regard to what you thought were in the stomach contents, just sort of as a way to start?
Well, I first looked at the stomach contents initially first.
What did they look like just to the naked eye?
Well, they were rather creamy, brownish, light brown in color, chunky, you could say, a bit chunky, and pretty homogeneous in terms of what was there. It didn't look like there was a large volume of vastly different materials. It was little chunks of light brown material.
What role does what the police tell you in terms of your analysis?
Well, I like to, as many scientists do, like to have as large a picture as I can of the area which I'm investigating. For instance, I'm not really interested in all of the details of the case. But in this particular case, they wanted me to identify the stomach contents. So it's good to know all about the victim's activities, which may have or may not have occurred before she was found in that area. So I tried to find out as best I could through talking to the police department what types of evidence do you have and how that may help in my case.
Okay. How detailed of information did you get?
Well, I received an email from Kathleen Decker. She was the detective at the time working on this particular case, in which she mentioned that they found a receipt in the car of the I believe it might be the victim's car.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a taco time receipt that was date stamped and time stamped. It had a particular dollar amount on that particular invoice or receipt.
Is it your understanding that the receipt did not show precisely what was purchased, as opposed to just the total cost?
Yes, just the total cost was listed there.
So it didn't say what the food was?
Correct.
Now, does what the police tell you affect what your conclusions are, what you find?
No, it's just part of the investigation, actually. Finding out information from the police is useful, but I have to scientifically look at the evidence at hand and determine what it is myself.
Now, to start, referring you to your report, what did you generally find in the stomach contents?
Well, referring to the report, most of the material that I examined was like a broken up pinto bean material, a bean which can be identified microscopically.
Okay. And what else?
Well, what else? There was a yellow bell pepper, like the skin of a yellow bell pepper, which was found coiled up, you could say, within the gastric contents. Also found within the stomach contents were starch grains, cornstarch primarily, with a small amount of wheat starch, little seeds, little pepper seeds, red pepper particles. And that's primarily what was found in the stomach contents.
Okay. And did you consider that consistent with a Mexican-type meal?
Yes, I did.
What type of lab equipment did you use to do an analysis like that?
Well, the lab equipment begins with something you might call rudimentary. It's a series of sieves, which are stacked one upon the other, which have a particular size. So, for instance, the coarse sieve is on top. Then progressively finer sieves are stacked below it. The gastric contents are placed in a formalin solution and alcohol, and a portion is sieved or allowed to flow through the sieves, which separates the material into different size ranges. And then they're rinsed with alcohol. Excuse me, alcohol. By the way, is there a little glass
Would you like some water?
You're fine. Do you need a lozenge? I did last week. Oh. Water would be fine, though. Thank you.
As you already know, I've been taking these things by the gross.
Thank you for this progression. Now that I'm 58, I forgot what I was talking about. Now
Well,
that I'm not.
you were talking about a sieve.
Oh, yeah, the
And
sieve.
can you tell us, first of all, what is a sieve?
A sieve is a round, in this case, they're all different sizes, but it's a 3-inch brass device which has a screen in the bottom of it, like for flour sieves or sieves, as you might call them. I don't bake or cook too much, but something like that, only has a real defined size. And I've stacked 3 of them together, poured the gastric contents into the top, and all the fluid comes out the bottom, which was retained, and I look at the material that was on the sieves separately, microscopically. And that's simply just to size sort the individual particles, so it's easier to look at it that way.
And did you make any purchases for comparison purposes?
Yes, I did.
What were you looking for?
Well, I was trying to look at pinto beans, refried beans, which are usually used, or not usually, often used in Mexican-style foods. So I went to a Taco Time restaurant because the receipt was Taco Time, so why not go to a Taco Time? I could have gone to a Taco Bell or Taco Loco or some other taco restaurant, but I went to Taco Time and purchased some items there.
Okay. And what did you purchase?
I purchased because in my analysis I didn't find any skeletal muscle or meat. Didn't find any meat. I wanted to find a meals or different types of foods there which were consistent with what I found in my examinations. So I purchased a Taco Time meal deal number 3.
And what was in that?
A crisp taco shell with refried brown pinto beans, lettuce, chopped red tomatoes, and yellow shredded cheese, and Mexi fries. And I also picked up some condiments that were found there also. A hot sauce, for instance.
Okay. All right. Is that the hot sauce in little packets?
Yes.
With the food, once you bought it, let's start with the beans. What did you do with the beans?
Well, with the beans, the first thing I did was visually look at them, as we imagined you would. And then using a stereobinocular microscope, it's a low-power microscope which magnifies materials up to, say, 100 times magnification. The light's reflected off of the material, and it goes through a series of lenses and mirrors and eyepieces, so I can examine the particles under low magnification.
Let me stop you right there and just ask you first, to the naked eye, before you put it under magnification, did you put the beans that you bought next to the stomach contents that you had separated out, and were you able to tell anything from that?
Yes, I did. They were similar enough visually to continue with an experiment. Oftentimes, when things are so drastically different, you could stop the experimentation. But in this case, they were similar enough to continue.
Did you do anything with the beans yourself?
Yes, I decided to put them in my mouth, a portion of them, and chew them up, simulating, chewing food, and then actually spit them out onto a weighing boat or a plastic dish.
How
for
many times
examination.
did you chew them?
Approximately 40 times.
Why 40?
Well, my mother told me to chew my food 40 times, I guess. So I just picked an even number. I could have picked 42 or 41 or just 40.
What about the fact that the chemical makeup in your mouth might be different than Nicole's? Were you worried about that?
Not particularly worried about that. I was looking at the physical components, the physical process of chewing them up and what it would look like. The chemical process, at that point, I was not overly concerned with.
Well, let me ask you this, before we talk a little bit more about beans. Did you see any meat or chicken? I think you mentioned this before. Did you see any meat or chicken in the stomach contents?
No, I did not.
Okay. And that's something that likely would have survived the digestion process up to that point?
Yes, I believe it would.
Now, the beans, I think you said, were the items with the largest quantity in her stomach, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do a list. There we go. Okay. Let's just go through a list of what you found before we do anything else. Now, are there different types of beans that would show up looking different when you examine them?
Oh, yes.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, again, I don't cook much at home, quite honest. But I do.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I couldn't hear that.
I don't cook much at home. I do have a few bean recipes, but there are quite a few different types of beans. I actually purchased a bag of beans as a demonstrative.
Okay, can you pull that out maybe?
Sure. Okay.
So what is it about that bag that helps you illustrate what you're talking about?
This is a 15 bean soup bag. So there are approximately 15 different types of beans within the bag. What I've done is I've taken a representative portion of those beans out of that bag into a different bag, which you can see them a little easier. And even from the naked eye, you can tell there is a vast variety of different colors and shapes and sizes of beans. So visually, you can tell the difference between many beans, but beyond that, you can continue microscopically examining beans with the stereoscope, as I talked of earlier, and the polarizing light microscope, which is another instrument which was used. Would you like me to discuss that?
Sure. We'll look at some slide pictures later,
Okay.
but tell us how you identified these as pinto beans.
Well, the pinto bean itself, it can be identified by looking at its surface structure and its tissues. It's called histology. It's a study of vascular tissues and materials. In this case, within the cell wall of the pinto bean, there's two layers which can be identified and characterized and compared microscopically using that polarizing light microscope, in which case I'll discuss in a moment. But another electron microscope, which is also used, called a scanning electron microscope, which you can look at the cell structure at very, very high magnifications, up to, say, 10, 20, 30, 40,000 times. And that was also performed in this particular case, and compared to the material from Nicole's stomach contents.
Okay. So all these things you were comparing to what were in the stomach contents, is that right?
Yes.
So if Nicole had purchased a meal and asked for beans, would that be consistent with what you found?
Yes, at least at the Taco Time restaurant that I went to, the refried beans were pinto beans.
Okay. Now, did you know exactly how Nicole ordered the meal or what part she did or did not eat?
Oh, I have no idea.
So how did you proceed knowing that?
Well,
or not knowing that?
I did a couple things. I went online and looked at all the different meal varieties Taco Time sells. And then I went to a Taco Time. And I wanted to find meals or food products which were consistent with what I found in her stomach. Basically, could I find a meal or a food product that had no meat in it, that was mostly just refried pinto beans, and maybe some red pepper, some yellow pepper. So I selected meal deal number 3, and I went from there. Tried to examine all the particles in meal deal number 3 and compared it to what was in her stomach to look for similarities and or differences.
Okay. So you were buying something that specifically had beans in it so you could compare it to the beans?
Yes, I
that you
was.
found.
Yes, I did.
What kinds of starches did you find?
Primarily cornstarch in the stomach contents, and a bit of wheat starch, but the starch mainly was consistent with the pinto bean starch, which we'll see pictures of later, and I'll show you what it looks like.
Okay.
That was the main starch.
How about the starch in a taco shell?
Well, the taco shells usually are composed of the corn starches.
And the hot sauce packets, what were you looking to compare to when you found or when you got those to put up against the stomach contents?
When I looked at the refried brown pinto beans from meal deal number 3, I didn't see any of these yellow, curly, microscopic particles of a skin off of a vegetable product. So I figured, seeing they were found in small quantities, they're probably from one of the spice packs. So I received a couple of the spice packs and looked at the contents of them, in which case I did find a corresponding particle in the spice pack, which was similar to what was found in her stomach.
Okay. And did you buy anything else to help in the comparison?
Yes, I bought a yellow bell pepper.
To your understanding?
Mexi fries are a fried potato structure, which has potato starch.
And would you necessarily expect to find evidence of Mexi fries at this point in the digestion process if they had been eaten?
I actually did look for potato starch, and I did not find any, but it could have totally been digested and consumed.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the some of the text on the screen. I think they're...
Counsel, I can't see the text on the screen.
And I would ask to take it up outside the presence of the jury, Your Honor. Some of the text is not what he has testified to in its argument.
All right, counsel, you want to turn that off? That take care of your objection, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, and we ask that the jury disregard the slide.
The jury will consider his testimony. The slide is an attempt to assist from his testimony to the extent that you find his testimony was at variance from what was up on the screen. You will consider his testimony, not what was written up on the screen.
Let me ask you this to clarify. With regard to lettuce and Mexi fries, would you necessarily have found evidence of them in the stomach contents, given this state of digestion?
It's variable, possibly.
It's also possible not.
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Okay. Are there other possibilities as well?
Four other possibilities do exist. Number one, she didn't have Mexi fries, she didn't have lettuce, or she had Mexi fries and or lettuce, and it's totally digested. Or a third option was they were both eaten, but in small quantities, in which they were not observed during my examination.
Did you see any evidence of tomatoes?
No, I did not.
What about cheese? Did you see any evidence of cheese?
No, I did not.
Does that surprise you with regard to cheese? What about cheese is a little unusual?
Well, what I'm mainly looking at are solid components in the digestion of the stomach contents, liquids and fluids, which are homogeneous. I really did not examine. But the cheese products there, of course, could be easily digested, and there aren't any characteristics microscopically which you can identify cheese with when it's in a digestive state. There's nothing really to see.
What happens to it? What does it turn into that you can't see it?
It's just a colloidal fluid with fats and oils.
So does that necessarily mean that there was no cheese consumed?
No, it just means I did not see it. It could still be there.
Now, how certain can a scientist be about all this? What are you basing it on with regard to the scientific level of certainty?
Well, I'm basing it on the fact that using the various microscopes which were employed, I was able to identify and characterize the food groups which I've already mentioned. And I can say positively that they were there and present in her stomach. In terms of levels of scientific certainty, I don't have a level that I can assign to that.
Okay. Let's actually look at some of the food comparisons that you made.
Okay.
State's Exhibit 115 has been marked.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 115. Could you take a look through that and tell us just sort of generally what's contained in it?
Well, as I'm looking through it, there are numerous photographs labeled A through F. They are color images which I have taken with the microscopes in the State Patrol Crime Lab.
And do they depict part of what you saw in comparison of the taco time meal with the contents of Nicole's stomach?
Yes.
I'd offer, is it 118?
115.
115.
Your Honor, I do have an objection that,
Oh, I was waiting, I didn't hear it.
that I can address later with the court.
What's that?
I do have an objection regarding the representations here that I would, and some of the labels that I'll like to take up later with the court.
You have an objection to, not to the photographs, but to the written material?
Yes, Your Honor.
The written material will be explained by the witness, so if we're going to deal with it, we need to deal with it now because I plan to show it with them.
Well, then it'll be illustrative. To take care of your
Yes.
objection, counsel?
Yes.
It does. I will be offering it as substantive later, Your Honor.
Counsel, if you want to have testimonial information written on it, it's illustrative. If you just want the photos, it can be for all purposes, but whenever he writes something on it, it is his testimony concerning what the photograph is. That makes it something other than just a photograph. So, I will admit it for illustrative purposes.
I'd like you to look first at the first slide picture in that packet, which I believe is A, and compare it to B, and tell us what we're looking at. Would it assist you to have the global packet of pictures that you took?
I'm referring to my notes.
Okay.
And I'm comparing the pictures from my notes to what's up there.
Okay.
Because mine are annotated
Okay.
with my writing, and I can see from the structures exactly which photograph is which.
Okay.
So far.
What does photograph A depict?
That's the taco time pinto bean, which I chewed, or the pinto bean, refried beans from the taco time meal that were chewed and placed on a little plastic dish
Okay.
and examined.
Those don't look like beans now. What magnification was that under?
That was actually under a stereo microscope, so what you're seeing there is a highly magnified image. If you were to look at that visually, you would not see any of those structures at all.
And photograph B?
That is the gastric contents, a magnified image, at a very similar magnification as the previous image of her gastric contents, showing some of the same type of bean structure.
So photograph C is a combination of the first two photographs, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And is that accurate that the top photo is the beans that you chewed and the bottom photo is the stomach contents from Nicole?
Oh, yes, it is.
Photograph D, what does that show? Sorry. Oh, E, sorry. Did I go too far? Oops, sorry. Okay, D. There we go.
I may need to refer to the original notes that you, or photographs that you said, or a complete packet.
Okay. Your Honor, could we take our break, because I think there's a glitch on the PowerPoint.
We may.
Thank you.
Please be seated. We'll take our, we're taking our regular recess, right?
Hey, Mr. Schneck. Hi. I'm Cooper Offenbecker. I'm one of the defense attorneys. Yeah, I interviewed you over the phone. How you doing? Doing good. How are you? Good. Hey, let me just ask you one thing. There was some discussion about lettuce. Is this one of the manuals that you used? I found this online. I recognize the name. It would only let me print one page at a time. Oh, okay. But, so I looked for lettuce. Does that look like a page from that manual about lettuce? Yes. Okay. And how about that magnification? How does that compare to the magnification you used?
Within the range of what I use, yes. I was using full red microscope, light microscope.
Yeah. Okay. And you didn't see anything like this in this demo?
No, there's more images of lettuce that can look different than that. One really called Samara. Yeah. Rianne's, I have a copy of the book and doesn't look much better. Yeah. But she became a business. Correct.
But there wasn't anything like this in the
What's his father?
No, that's not true.
Why?
Okay.
I just said you had a degree. They also knew that you did it. I thought you kind of got a copy of that.
I guess it's fifth week, but we had a week off.
It's
So,
more,
yeah.
not most of it, but more of what happened.
Supposed to get through, yes.
Oh, good. Took the light rail. Yeah, that light rail. Yeah, that was pretty nice. Ever have anybody spill water on your blanket?
No, thank goodness.
Later they spilled their coffee all over a baby on a plane.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, that was pretty bizarre. The plane wasn't shared yet. So the baby was screaming and crying.
Yeah.
And we get to see Detective McNabb again.
Well, there's quite a few detectives on this case that changed through the years.
That's right. When you bought the food at Taco Time, was that in 2006 or 2007?
You know, I'll let you look at my notes. Maybe 2000, probably 7. See, that's when most of the work was done here. Oh, well, maybe not. No, it was 2006. April 20th, 2006.
Okay. Are there any other means that this could be other than Kentucky?
Not that I'm aware of. certainly there's beans throughout the world. To Colombia, you see indigenous meals from all parts of Colombia.
Yeah.
But the common foods that are eaten in North America. And so beans are, those guys are.
In terms of the actual inner cell structure, though, I mean, how does keto bean differ from, say, what's that?
That is a kidney.
Kidney. How would it differ from a kidney bean?
Well, I didn't look at all of them, so I really don't know
Okay.
exactly how they would differ.
Okay.
Other than looking at images of the textbooks.
Yeah.
I just picked those up last night.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just textbooks.
Yeah.
Be a great research project, because I really would know that.
Yeah. You wouldn't have had to do something, I just wanted, that was my way of saying,
Do you have an Elmo device here you ever use? Elmo? Things reflects light down onto the image.
Well,
This works pretty good, I guess.
yeah, I don't know.
This is supposed to be a step up from Elmo.
Yeah.
Oh, step up?
Oh, yeah. Elmo was kind of a glorified overhead projector.
He was.
Yeah.
I'm still used to it. I wish we had 35mm slides every once in a while.
They usually work. There's no more film. There's no more film cameras, right?
That's right. I haven't thrown out the projector yet. I don't know what I'm doing with it. It's gonna sit there.
I have all my old slides.
What's that?
You still have your slides printed?
Well, I have my old slides from,
Me too.
Couldn't get those digitized.
Yeah.
well, hell, let me do some research, don't kill yourself.
They're selling. They're advertising a cell phone TV now with
Oh, yeah, the guy.
a 14 megapixel camera.
Oh, yeah.
That's incredible. The last digital camera I bought years ago is,
Yeah.
the newest Nikon,
Yeah.
compact was like 8 megapixels, or 6 or 8. Now your phone has 15.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They do. Megapixels is part of it, though.
Yeah.
There's this chip inside of it. The chip size makes a big difference, too. Like I've got a 4.5 megapixel camera that takes really big pictures. Are you bailiff then? Is that your clerk? Clerk? What are all those?
Units?
Those are all different.
These are all different. You're 114 and 115 in a growing line. With a ways to go.
Really? How many more witnesses are there?
Well, I don't know. The list is about this. They discussed that last week. We have, of course, the state has to rest. But then,
Yeah, that's